I'm Jay. I'm an alcoholic. Hi, everybody. I'm a member of the Temple Hills group, a card-carrying member. The first night I sobered up was on a Sunday night, and I'll never forget it. I was in Tampa, Florida, and you know, when you sober up, everything comes in on you, all the money you owe, and of course everybody comes in here owes money. So the only person I knew in AA that I didn't think it'd run me off, I called them on the hour, all night long, every hour. And I'd tell, well, I owe the IRS $9,000. Well, if you don't drink, you won't get drunk. About an hour later, I'd call him. Well, they're going to take the house away. If you don't drink, you won't get drunk. All night long like that. Well, I was standing by the door with Tommy a minute ago. We looked over there was a Donnelly, Hollering, and Haley sitting there in a huddle talking to each other. No telling what to come across there. But I believe if you took the Haleys, Donnellys, and Hollerings and Reese's and put them all together, you could start about 5 treatment centers. But everybody knows I'm a pharmacist, which gives me a right to take mind-changing drugs before I come to AA. But anyhow, I was working the drive-through window at Eckert Drug right there in Bellevue about 3 or 4 years ago, and Frank's sister-in-law and brother moved from Donaldson over there, and so Francis come by the drive-through window one day, and I had never met Francis, so I reached my hand out the window and said, Francis, I'd like to introduce myself. I married Moe Hollering's daughter. And she said, how could we be so unlucky? But anyway, our speaker tonight, that's where I caught alcoholism, 1973. And I remember when he would come visit us in Tampa, he had that 24-hour book. And my conception of Alcoholics Anonymous was you held on that book all day and just walked around and just hung on till you got to bed that night, afraid you was going to drink. I had no idea what was going on. But anyway, this is we're very fortunate tonight to get to hear this guy. I could tell his story. I've heard it a million times. But I laugh at every joke and cry at every sad story, and he's a man I love, and probably the man I love more than anybody in the world, my father-in-law, who my kids call him affectionately Mo Daddy.
Well, I am Moe Hollering. I am an alcoholic. I'm grateful to be here and to be sober, and it's only through God's grace that I am. And, I just stand and wonder sometime about being sober. I know that I never had the ability to achieve any kind of sobriety in my life till I reached that point of desperation and some little touch of surrender in my life, and then the grace of God entered my life, and it's only through that grace that I'm sober. I'd hate to think that I was going to be able to stay sober on my intelligence. I know that he made a remark a while ago. Mike said this might be a continuing thing if it's successful, and I might shoot that down right here tonight. But Mike, I do want to thank you for asking me to come out here and talk, and all I can share with you is what it was like for me as a practicing alcoholic, what happened to me and what life is like now. There's a few things that I've heard around the program over the years that just kind of gets me to where I need to be and what I really was like during my addiction to alcohol. And I remember an old poem I heard said it was a cool evening in October, and I was far from being sober. I was carrying home a load with manly pride when my feet began to stutter and I fell down in the gutter, and a pig come up and laid down by my side. Now, we were talking of the weather as when good friends get together, when a lady passing by was heard to say, why, you can tell someone that boozes by the company that he chooses. and the pig got up and slowly walked away. And you know, I know that people really must have looked at me that way. Another story I heard that reminds me of me, I heard about an old boy like me that he came to, been in a blackout for 3 or 4 days out in San Francisco in a hotel room, and it was the morning after one of them big earthquakes. And he comes to, and he stumbles over there, and he pulls the shade back and looks outside and says, "My God, how am I going to pay for this?" And you know, I woke up a lot of mornings really feeling like it. And another thing, I think about how booze affected me, and I was thinking about a old boy like me down at the train, around the train station in Nashville, and he's bumming drinks, and this guy shows up, and he's got about an hour before he catches the train. He brings him in a bar and buys him a drink. The old boy said, "Where are you going?" He said, "Well, I'm fixing to go to Memphis." He said, "Oh, God, man, here's my brother's phone number." Said, "When you get over there, call him and tell him I'm sick, and if he could just see his way clear to send me a couple of $100, I really would appreciate it." And the guy said, "I'll be glad to." And he bought him another drink and another drink and another drink. Finally, it's time for the old boy to catch the train. He's going out the door, and that guy hollered at him and said, "Don't forget now, call that brother of mine. Tell him if he needs anything, call me." Yeah, I mean, that's the way it affected me. I was either humble and servile and, oh, God, me, or either I had the answers to everything when you put that bug juice in me. Steve, would you get me a drink of water or something? So, you know, that's just the way my life was going. And you know, it's amazing. They talk about all the stuff that happens. I remember I'd been sober, I guess, 3 or 4 or 5 months or something, and I was talking to my sister one day, and I was telling my sister, I said, "You know, I cannot believe that I continued to drink and destroy everything in my life, yet I could not admit drinking had anything to do with it. It never was the drinking. It was if you had to live with her, you drink too. If you had to work for that guy I worked for, you drink too. It never was the drinking." And my sister told me, she said, "Well, you like Uncle Walter." And me and old Haley had an uncle named Walter, lived down in McEwen, Tennessee, and I never will forget, he didn't have but one eye, and he had an old glass eye. And when I was a kid, he used to pull that eye out and try to give it to me and scare me to death. And I went down there one time, he was drunk, he'd just take a pistol and shoot holes in the ceiling and everything else. And Uncle Walter was wild. I remember him coming up to Nashville and threw a whole pack of firecrackers in my mama's grate, and them hot coals flying, and her beating him behind the head with a broom running there. I thought he was crazy. I didn't know nothing about alcoholism. And then my sister said, "Well, you like Uncle Walter." I said, "What do you mean like Uncle Walter?" Said, "Well, Uncle Walter was bad about going into DTs. And he'd jump up, grab a broom, start beating all over the kitchen floor, saying he was a killing rats. And one day they were sitting there drinking, and he wasn't really all that drunk. But sure enough, a little old mouse run out from under a cabinet, run across the floor, and run under another cabinet. And he looked around all of them. He says, "By God, y'all thought I saw a rat, but I didn't." And that, I guess that was the first case of denial, you know. And I caught it bad because I would not admit drinking had anything to do with my life. I grew up over on 24th and Charlotte, right over there where old Frank grew up. And when I was a kid, of course, Frank's older brother married my older sister, and I caught alcoholism too, you know, all of us in the family. But I grew up on a great street over there, and I had a great childhood, man. I grew up on a little old street called Little Ireland. They called it 24th Avenue North, And all us kids was known as the 24th Avenue Alley Rats. And we had a great time playing ball every day, kicked the can. There was a street full of kids because all of them had that CIA disease. All of them were Catholic, Irish, alcoholic. And I grew up around drinking, and I never saw anything detrimental about drinking. In fact, every time I was around people drinking, they looked like to me they was having more fun than anybody in the world. And I connected drinking with fun. I thought if you was going to have fun in life, you had to get drunk. And I never did see them, the next morning wrapped around them commodes hollering, "Oh, God." I just saw them when they was at their best and laughing and having a good time and having fist fights and all that. And I thought, man, I had brother and a brother-in-law that did that every night. I thought, man, when I get old, that's what I want to do. So that's what I connected drinking with. And I grew up drinking and being around it. I can remember as a kid emptying beer bottles off tables, and nobody thought anything about that. It was kind of a accepted way of living around that family of ours. So I never had any kind of a fear of drinking alcohol. But I had a great childhood. I went off to school. It was a great time of my life, but drinking had already become a part of my life because every chance that I had to take a drink, I'd take a drink. And I started running with people that knew how to get it, and we started drinking. And I went off to school down in Cullman, Alabama, and what a great life it was down there because I had some athletic abilities, and I don't know how it is in school now, but back when I was going to high school, if you could play sports, you didn't have to study. They just kind of passed you to keep you eligible, I guess, and I mean, it's the greatest way in the world to go through school. The only problem now, you come out stupid. I'll tell you that right now. And I've always kind of regretted that about my life. But I was already getting in trouble drinking even when I was in high school, that early in life. I was getting called in about some insane things and drinking at the wrong time, at the wrong place. And I finally got out of school. I had a chance. I'd been to a Boston Red Sox tryout camp, had been to a St. Louis Cardinals tryout camp. They had shown interest in me, but even right before I graduated, the guy that coached us told me, he said, "Boy, they're losing interest in you because of your lifestyle. See, you can't hang out at Cooper's down on Church Street at all hours of the night that they don't find out about it if they're interested in you." So I never will forget, I finally got out of high school, and the next thing you know, I get a thing from the Army wanting me to show up, and I panicked and joined the Navy, and the next thing you know, I thought I was going to San Diego, California. I left home, I had 65 cents and a toothbrush in my pocket. Had been blind running drunk the night before at the old plantation club out on Murfreesboro Road, and got on that train and ended up in Great Lakes, Illinois, like to froze to death up there. Now, if there's such a thing as crossing the invisible line, and I really believe there is, from so-called just fun drinking and raising Cain and doing all that stuff you do, into alcoholism, I believe I really crossed that line. That's where I began to be preoccupied with drinking in my mind. I had to be sober to look back at all that. And all of a sudden, drinking was real important to me. It was what I was always thinking of. And I never will forget, I ended up going off, and I was on a sub-rescue ship. We operated between Key West, Florida, and Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, and all I knew was getting that paycheck and getting drunk. And I'm standing out there one morning on that fantail, and I'm wobbling and shaking, and damn, this officer come out there and said, "Holland," said, "I want you to climb that A-frame and go out on those booms and grease those fittings." And I said, "Man, hell, I'm having a hard time standing here." I look up, it must be 60 foot up there. And I told him, I said, I ain't going nowhere. And he said, son, you're going to have to do what I tell you, or we're going to have to bust you in rank. I said, you bust me in rank, I'm going to be a civilian. I ain't got nothing but what you gave me. And I've done been in there almost 4 years. And you know, I really hate to say it, but I was a full-blown alcoholic. But if you told me at that time, Moe, you're an alcoholic, I'd say, man, you got to be crazy. I ain't no alcoholic. It's cunning, baffling, and powerful. And yet you could have took those 4 years of mine and put them in a garbage can for what they were worth. I didn't learn anything. Things that had been important to me in my life suddenly were unimportant. Where I had loved sports and playing sports, where I had grew up with a faith and a belief in a power greater than me that I choose to call God, all of that good stuff, where I had a lot of love and respect for other people. My mother and dad were the greatest people in the world, taught me, as Frank says, everything that I'm learning today. But I didn't listen. But I had all of that inside of me, and I believe that's the reason I felt as rotten about myself when I got into the depths of my disease. It's amazing what that stuff will do to you. And so I got out of the service. I was a full-blown dyed-in-the-wool alcoholic. They gave me something like $300 or something, mustering out pay, and took me 2.5 weeks to get to Nashville. Got here, didn't even have the 65 cents or the toothbrush. Run into another drunk just like me. We'd run together, and we'd go up to Murfreesboro. State teacher, I'm going to get a college education. Go up there and sign up for pre-engineering. Hell, I can't even spell pre-engineering. And it charged everything up there, waiting on them government checks to come in every month, and then not paying your bills, and you get up every morning, go out to 41A Club and start drinking. And I'll tell you, there ain't no professors come out there. We didn't last 4 months up there, and I was so heavily in debt, I had to come home and go to work to try to catch up. I just continued to drink. The disease was in me, and it was eating me alive, but yet it's so subtle that I don't know about other people's illness. Mine was slow, progressive, and then finally just boom, I fell off a cliff. And when that happened, son, I was a lost ball in high weeds. Sometime in 1957, I had a great job or a great opportunity at a company called Western Electric. They had moved here from Louisville, Kentucky. I had gone to work for them in the early stage, had all kind of opportunities for promotion. I'd gotten married. I had a wife. I had 2 kids. We bought a brand new house. From the outside, everything looked like the all-American family. And on the inside, it's just falling completely apart because of my illness. All of a sudden, I'm going through the things that we all go through. I can't make it to work. I'm too sick. That's when all the viruses and the flus and stuff started, and I'm getting sicker all the time. I'm trying to hang on with dear life, and when you drink like I do, you're going to start hurting physically. You're going to start deteriorating physically. I never will forget, I used to go to this doctor down on Hayes Street, go in there just shaking all the pieces, and back in, you know, they give you nerve medicine. And I'd drop my britches, and he'd shoot me in the butt, you know, and I looked around, hell, he's taking his pants off. He said, I think I'll have one of them too. And Frank knows him. Frank knows who he was, the biggest drunk in Nashville. And ain't none of that stuff ever helped me, but everything was falling apart. I couldn't make it to work. And all of a sudden, they called me in, and they talked to me, management and union, in this big room. They said, Harlan, I want to tell you, son, your attendance record is horrible. You ain't ever here on Monday. You don't show up on Tuesday. You don't call. They chewed me out for a solid hour. And right at the very end, one of them guys said, but I'll tell you one thing. When Holland's here, he's one of the best employees we got. And see, I'm so sick, I walk out that room thinking, why in the hell don't they give me a raise? That other hour didn't, that's mental sickness, man, I'm telling you. And things are just getting horrible at home. Jackie, it's running her crazy. The kids don't know what to do. They're not having friends at home. It was on a Thanksgiving Day. A buddy of mine come by, and we was drunk already, going to the Clinic Bowl football game at Vanderbilt. Went over there and had a half pint stuck all over us, and don't remember the ball game. And you know, I remember coming down them at ramp down through there, and damn mustard and ketchup all over me. And I remember I got out there by the street, and I started throwing up these coffee grounds. And I remember telling that old boy, I said, man, I ain't drinking no more coffee. And this was on a Thursday, and I passed out and had to go to work Friday morning. I'm back down there at work, and man, I'm swelling up and throwing up. And that stuff done started coming out my nose. I go up there to the nurse's office and tell her what's going on, and she writes down a doctor's name. She said, I want to tell you, boy, you need help, and you need it right now. You get out of here and go to that doctor. Well, I left, went down on 4th Avenue, got me a half pint. I went up that old bamboo club up there on Thompson Lane, and I just sit up there and swell up and throw up. I don't know what time I got home, but sometime during the night, I think it's around 11:30, I just fell out in the bathroom floor. But I wasn't unconscious, and my wife ran in there, and I told her about that doctor's phone number. And she called him, and he told her to get me to the hospital immediately. And she called her brother. He came over in a wagon, a station wagon. They loaded me in there, and here I go to the hospital. And I'm laying up there with all these tubes in me and everything, and this little old doctor about that eye come run that room. He said, son, you're bleeding to death. He said, you got an internal, a duodenal ulcer, and it's hemorrhaged on you, and I can't stop the bleeding. To make a long story short, they brought me upstairs and cut 3/4 of my stomach out. And I never will forget, I'm laying in that hospital, almost dead, and that doctor comes in the day he's discharging me, and me and Jackie in there, and as he's walking out the door, I holler at him, and I say, Doc, by the way, every now and then, you know, cutting the grass or watching a ball game, I enjoy a few drinks. Would that be all right? He said, yeah, that's fine. He went on out the door, and I turned around to my poor wife, and I said, by God, you heard what that doctor said. I don't want to hear no more about this drinking. I want to tell you, man, that's insanity. That is absolutely insanity. Things are deteriorating more and more and more. And I'm sitting there drunk one morning, and I can't hardly function anymore, and I told Jackie, I said, honey, I believe I'm losing my mind. She said, God, that's the smartest thing you've said in 6 weeks. And she called this priest, and this priest called this psychiatrist, and the next thing you know, I'm down there sitting in this psychiatrist's office. And he looks across that desk, and he said, what's wrong with you? I said, man, I don't know. I can't quit drinking. I said, I want to drink all the time. I said, I'm getting up at night and unplugging the radio, and it still plays. I said, hell, I put it in the closet, and it's playing. And he said, hold it. Do not say you're an alcoholic. You're too young to be an alcoholic. Something in your childhood is causing you to drink this way, and I can fix it. Well, that sounded pretty good to me. Next thing I know, here I go, out to Madison Sanitarium. Get out there, and they plug me in a wall. I don't know if anybody here has ever had shock treatment. Hell, I was the original Pac-Man, I guarantee. And you know, I was thinking today, a vision came in my mind walking down 8th Avenue one time drunk, and a heel had come off one of my shoes. You know how you walk. And I had somebody's overcoat on that was dragging the ground. I don't know where it goes. But that vision, and then when I'm telling this stuff, I'm telling you the truth. They used to take me down to a room, and it had a horse trough, and it was full of hot water. And they put me in that thing. I turned the color of that cup. And then these great big old guys would pick me up and slam me down in one with blocks of ice, and then wrap me in a wool blanket and lay me back in that bed. That was what they called shock therapy, see? And this electricity was supposed to take all these unpleasant memories. Let me tell you, it ain't painful, but it's scary as hell. You know, I'm laying there, and there's 6 guys come in, got these white coats on. They look like grave diggers, honestly. And three get on each side and hold you down, and then here come that psychiatrist with a battery charger. He's pushing, and he gets behind your bed, and he's got these things, they look like them hockey pucks where you shooting them bears on. They got wires on them. And he rolls that thing up behind you and puts them things on your head. And son, he flips that switch. It's Irene, good night. You're out of here. I don't tell you, you're supposed to, for that stuff, I've read up on it. You're supposed to have 21 of them things. If I'd have had 21, I won't tell you, you wouldn't want to shake my hand tonight. But I must have had either 2 or 3, my wife tells me, and she and my brother found out what they was doing to me. They come and got me and brought me out of there to the VA hospital down on White Bridge Road. I know some of you remember when it was down there. Well, thank God VA has some good programs now, but back then nobody knew nothing about alcoholism. And so they bring me down to the VA, and they put me in there, and I'm about to come unglued, man, with all that electricity in me. And I'm sitting there shaking, and all of a sudden, you're on this big wall. Here come a guy with a tray. Spun that thing around, had all these little white cups on it. And a guy said, Mr. Harlan, this is yours. And I picked it up, looked in there. Son, all these different colored pills looked like an Easter basket. I threw that thing down, and son, 11 o'clock, I'm down there bowling at the bowling alley. Yeah, everything's looking good. And about 3 o'clock, man, I'm starting to do that again, and bip, here come that Easter basket. Son, 4 o'clock, I'm making leather pocketbooks. Putting them bull horns on it, you know. I won't tell you, man, I'm sitting there and my mind is so sick. You know what I'm thinking? I hope she appreciates this. Hell, I ain't worked in 2 years. I mean, that is pitiful. And it was getting sicker all the time, and by this time, I'm getting into oblivion drinking. I don't know about other people. I just know about Moe H. But I honestly believe that from the day I took that first drink, I started through a personality change. And I eventually became everything in life that I never wanted to be. And my whole attitude, outlook, and reaction to life changed altogether. And I began to be not low self-esteem. I went right straight to self-hatred. When I looked in that mirror, I hated what I had become. And I had become irresponsible. I used to promise my children that I loved better than anything in the world. And I want to tell you, I love my wife and children as much when I was in the middle of that stuff as I do today. I just could not express it because I was being destroyed by a disease I didn't even know I had. But I'd make these promises to my kids, and then I'd wake up early in the morning, and I'd tell them we're going to the park and feed the ducks, but I'd wake up sick, man, from being drunk and shaking all to pieces, and I had to get something to drink. So I'd slip out that back door and go get drunk again, and the day's over, and I come in and pass out. Now, I want to tell you, when I woke up, boy, and I looked in that mirror, I used to say, God, man, what kind of person are you? How could you do that to your own children? Now, I don't know about y'all, but the only solution that I had to that deal was to take another drink. And as soon as I could get that inside of me, I could justify every bit of what had happened. I could lie to myself enough to say, man, them kids didn't want to go to that park. They'd rather be over here playing with their friends and everything. There's more to do around here than that old park. And I'd convince myself until the bug juice wore out. And when that wore out, all them feelings and emotions came back, and I did not know how to handle them other than to take another drink. I had gotten into oblivion drinking where I would get on these sprees of 3 and 4 days of just absolute just out of it. And it was because I couldn't stand to look at what my life had become. The only peace of mind that I ever experienced during those times was when I was passed out. I did not drink to have fun. I wasn't drinking to go out dancing. I was drinking to pass out so that I didn't have to look at me and what I had become through the disease of alcoholism. It was a horrible thing. I never will forget. I'd get on them drunks like that, and Jackie would just have to take the kids and leave. And she'd go to either my sister's house or her mother's house and stay until I got off them drunks. And I remember being passed out in the bed one night and hearing this banging on the door. And I went to the back door, and there was my oldest sister. And she looked at me. I'll never forget the look on her face. Mike's grandmama. And I said, I don't want to see you or anybody in my family. Y'all stay out of my business. I'll handle my life. And slammed that door and locked it. Turned around, blood all in the sink, all over that kitchen table. Went down that hall where the bedroom was, blood all over, where I'd been falling into tables and furniture and everything, hunting a drink in that. That's where my life had gone. And I never will forget, it was that night my brother-in-law called me and said, Moe, I want to come and see you. I said, I don't want to see you or anybody. He said, I just had a couple of fists and a case of beer. And I said, come on out, Andy. I said, you're the only one in the family I care anything about. Ain't that awful? And he come out there, and I ended up, he talked me into going to this hospital, and we go up there the next morning, and I'm drunk, and he said, we got to stop in the courthouse, and I'm thinking, boy, it's some kind of hospital. Just anybody can't get in there. Well, next thing I know, I'm in a paddy wagon going out to Bordeaux Hospital. That's a nut house, really, if you be honest about it. And I'm going out there to Bordeaux, sentenced to 45 days. And, I mean, you talk about a mess, son. There ain't but 4 or 5 drunks. The rest of them are just totally crazy. And I'm right in the middle of that, going nuts. I never will forget they had me locked up in a padded cell. I was begging them to let me out of there. And finally, the next morning, they let me out. 15 minutes later, I was begging them to put me back in there. Things just went horrible. I don't even like to tell my story in AA anymore because we got a better class of alcoholics coming in here. And I'm afraid somebody's saying, God, if that's alcoholism, I got 10 more years of drinking to do. Well, somehow or other people don't get in that shape anymore, but I couldn't stop it. I just kept getting worse. I got out of that place, ended up almost burning up alive, catching my own house on fire. How I got out there, thank God, nobody was home. I don't know how I got out of there. It was like an incinerator in that house. I ran up in that hall, and it was the grace of God said nobody's home. I thought my little boy was up that hall in a bedroom. And I turned and ran, and I hit that back window in my little girl's room, and the whole casing fell out, and I went out head over there to burn up alive. It just kept, I couldn't stop it. I'd walk the floor at night. God, please help me. But I know today I wasn't wanting to stop the drinking. I was wanting him to let me drink without having all these problems, see? And I couldn't get serious about that. And it was when I burnt the house down that I had my first 12-step call. Cherry C come out to see me, him and his wife. And he started sharing with me about Alcoholics Anonymous. And I said, man, if I could just get settled down, you know. He called some doctor and got some kind of green dragon or something in a bottle. He come out there, he's supposed to take a teaspoon every 8 hours or something. And he gave me a teaspoon of that, and I promised him I'd go to AA the next day. Well, hell, he left the house. I drank the whole bottle and fell in the hall going back to the room. Couldn't even get back there. I was insane, man, crazy. And things just continued, and I almost burned up again in somebody else's house. Just drunks in there, just on them 3 and 4 day benders, and insane, crazy. Just through the grace of God, one of them drunks got me out of the room. They said there was claw marks all in the wall in there where I was hunting a door and couldn't find one because I was so out of my gourd. And I ended up in St. Thomas Hospital emergency room, strapped down on a bed, and I remember crying out, God, please help me. I believe I was probably more sincere that night than I'd ever been in my life. And I kept screaming at, and this guy, they was about ready to take me to jail because I was so insane. And they finally called a brother-in-law of mine that hadn't been around me much, and he came and got me. And he took me to his house. I never will forget just getting on my knees up in that upstairs bedroom saying, God, either let me get sober or let me die. And I really meant that with all. I'd laid down many, many nights saying, God, just please don't let me wake up. Didn't want no pain, didn't want anything involved, but I just knew that if I got up, I was going to get drunk. And that's what my life had become. I never will forget, I'd been around AA. I'd been in and out of AA like a yo-yo. I went to AA and I yes-buddied and I said, hell, them old people, they ought to get sober. They ought to quit everything they're doing. Now, you know, I'm too young to be an alcoholic. I went through all that stuff. But I went back that last time teachable, man. I was begging for help. I didn't have any more answers. I was at the lowest point of my life. I began to hang out with people. I got a sponsor named Joe Malloy. Joe was one of these guys that lived this program till its fullest. Every time I turned around, he'd calling me at 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning saying, I'll pick you up in 15 minutes, taking me on 12-step calls, picking me up to go to AA meetings every night. We met up at 407.5 Union. I never will forget walking up those steps. There was 52 steps up there, and they had a big sign at the very top that said 12 more to go. And when I walked in those rooms, I was met with unconditional love. And these people reached out to me, started spending time with me. Back then, there was no big book studies, 12 and 12 studies. None of that went on in AA. It was almost just one alcoholic carrying another alcoholic. They never let loose of you. Somebody was with you. Nobody had a job when they come to AA, so somebody'd pick you up and haul you around every day, and they'd drop you off at different places. I remember old boy painted signs for the highway department. They dropped me off at his garage out there one day, and I never will forget. He said, how you doing? I said, well, I'm worried to death. He said, hell, man, worry's like a rocking chair to give you something to do, but it won't get you nowhere. He said, we don't use that word in AA. We substitute concern. And if you're concerned about something, go do something about it. And they began to teach me those things. I remember riding down Broad Street with my sponsor, Joe, and I hadn't been sober long. He said, "Moe, how you get along with people?" I said, "Oh, man, Joe, I get along with people great." "What about people that disagree with you?" I said, "To hell with them." He didn't say nothing. He just kept driving. Finally, he looked over at me, and he said, "That's the kind of thing we work on in Alcoholics Anonymous." And boy, I tell you, I began to love AA. I began to find that hope that we all find when we come here. I met some of the greatest people in the world. I struggled with just about everything in AA. I drank to a point and hated me so bad that I didn't think God, even though I believed there was a God, would have anything to do with me. And I never will forget, I couldn't identify with God having anything to do with a person like me. And I was riding home from an AA meeting one night, and there was a lady named Georgia riding with us. And she had moved here from New York, and she was a great lady in solid AA. And I never will forget, I said, "If I could just identify with God." And she said, "Moe, I'm going to recite a poem for you, and I want you to remember it. I want you to think about it and see if it don't apply." And she looked me right in the eye, and she said, "I sought my God I could not see. I sought my soul eluded me. I sought my fellow man and found all three." Boy, I laid in that bed that night and got to thinking about when I was the most unlovable, rotten human being in the world. When I walked up them steps at 407.5 Union Street, I was met with unconditional love. They didn't care if I came from Yale or jail, from a flop house or a penthouse. On a scale of 1 to 10, we're all 5s, and they began to love me when I couldn't love myself. Those people spent time with me when I knew they had other things that they probably were more important. But they spent time with me, and they nurtured me along, and they began to share with me about this loving God that we need to find in our life. And I began to grow in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I began to try and do the best I could with working the steps. I really found that source of power right in these rooms that I could identify with. I never went to a meeting I didn't feel that source of power. And I come to believe, for me only, that really the only way God can reveal himself to me is through you. I don't believe he reveals himself any other way for me. He reveals himself to me through other people. And the changes that begin to take place in my life that I really have no control over. It's amazing how different I feel about life today. And if I can continue to grow just a little bit at a time, no big leaps and bounds, if I care a little deeper today than I did yesterday, if I'm a little less selfish today than I was yesterday, just a little, I feel good about that. But I do believe it's like pumping a bicycle up a hill. If you ever quit pumping, you're going to come backwards. And I got to pump every day. I cut my teeth on getting on them knees early in the morning and saying, "God, please keep me sober. Let me help another alcoholic," and thanking him each night. I did that for a long time while my body was there and my brains hadn't showed up, and it kept me sober. I can remember going through a day after I continued to do that I used to inevitably get drunk over. And for the first time in my life, when I said, "God, thank you for this day of sobriety," it dawned on me that a drink never crossed my mind. I want to tell you, AA has blessed me tremendously. I've heard that remark around AA that, good things happen to sober alcoholics. I want to tell you, bad things happen to sober alcoholics. And that's the whole miracle of this program. It's not so much that God saved our life. It's the life that he's given us in this fellowship. I'd been sober a long time, had a great family, had a drunk son-in-law and a quaalude nephew and a drunk cousin, and everything was going great in my life and working at New Life, and just so grateful to God and everything. And I never will forget how this all started. And I'm going to share this with you. Just basically, the main reason is to show or demonstrate the power that's available in this program through a loving God that we sometimes don't even really realize it's there. But I was working at Cumberland Heights, and an old boy came into treatment that was so much like me, I couldn't believe it. And the first thing he said, I'll stay around, but this thing ain't going to work for me. He said, Moe, I've been in all them places. Ain't no way I'd never get sober. I just, I'll stay if they want me to stay, but ain't nothing going to work for me. He was just hopeless. And through the grace of God and that tremendous atmosphere out there, nothing I did, but through what was being presented, that guy latched on and somehow fell in love with the program, started really comprehending the steps, started really reacting to what he was receiving out there. And I used to walk to the gate with him late in the evening, just to shoot the breeze with him. And I never will forget, he pulled out a billfold and showed me a picture of his daughter one day. He said, she is valedictorian of her class this year and got a scholarship to the University of Alabama. He said, man, if I could just get out one day early, and it was against their policies out there, one day early I could be at her graduation. And he said, Moe, I got a bunch of kids, but I never was a part of this little girl's life. So I worked the deal out. He got out, went back home, went to her graduation, started building a relationship with her. I mean, called me, was the happiest guy, started chairing meetings, started 12-stepping people, started loving this program. And I was fortunate enough that I went down and spoke on his first AA birthday. And I went back and talked on his second and his third. And I never will forget, I was sitting at Cumberland one morning eating breakfast, and the phone rang, and it was Bill on the telephone, and that little girl had her head severed off in a car wreck. And I said, Bill, I'll come to you right now. He said, no. He said, Moe, let me tell you something, man. A drink hadn't crossed my mind. My house is full of AA people, full of Al-Anons. They're supporting me, loving me, praying for me. And he said, for the first time in my life, I'm in a position to be of strength and help to the rest of my family. God, I sat down, I couldn't eat. I mean, what power. He was a guy that never could stay sober. And yet he was talking that way, and I couldn't believe the faith. And I never will forget, I got to go back to another AA birthday, and that last, I think it was on his 5th birthday, I was talking, his whole family was sitting in the front row. I never saw such peace and love and grace in people's lives, and I got to meet all of them after the meeting. Usually me and Jackie get out there because it's a long way to Nashville. That night they got us in the kitchen. They shared all that AA had done, all the faith that they had mustered through the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And me and Jackie couldn't get it off our mind. We talked about it all the way back to Nashville. And see, I had no idea that God was just preparing me and Jackie. The following Saturday morning, our 19-year-old son gets killed in a car wreck. And I had Jay and Susie were living down in Tampa, Florida. My son was living out in Dallas. I had a little 13-year-old that had spent the night away. I want to tell you, a drink never crossed my mind. That's a miracle. So I want to tell you, Moe H does not know how not to do that. That's the grace of a loving God. And just like Bill, immediately my house was full of AA people. Al-Anons were there for my wife. They loved us. They supported us. I'll never forget down at that funeral home, everywhere I turned, there stood my sponsor. That was Bill Hall. He never left my side. He never said anything, never carried on any kind of advice, but everywhere I looked, there he stood. And I'll never forget that in my life. And so we began to heal up as a family, and we started growing together. I think it brought the whole family closer together. And that's the miracle of AA. The miracle of AA is that we handle life, and life doesn't handle us, through the grace of a loving, forgiving God. And I tell you, it's the most important thing in my life tonight is my relationship with God. That's the center. Everything else falls around the perimeter. Family, job, all of that. Nothing happens unless AA and God is the center of my life. Thank you all for listening. God bless you.